Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris and Beverley Ann.
Hello and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward. I'm Beverley Ann and joined by my wonderful co-host.
Hi everyone, Chris here.
And this episode is our May question and answers. And we've been contacted by somebody and we're going to be talking about coping mechanisms, relationships and coping mechanisms, aren't we, Chris?
We are indeed. This is going to be an interesting one because it might make some people understand and it might trigger others. So just a warning there, everyone.
Yeah, and if anything that we're saying irks a little bit, actually have a look at why it's irking you, what it is, because often that's where we don't want to hear it, but that's where the magic happens often.
And where the work often needs to be done. Do you agree, Bev?
Absolutely, yeah. I've had a few of them myself. So we've mentioned relationships, but we're not necessarily mentioning relationships with other people. This comes back to what we say about recovery, and it's relationship with self, but how we use other things around us as a coping mechanism. So namely, when we think about addiction, and the addiction comes in lots of different forms, because you have the standard addictions that we all recognize. So alcohol, drugs. But then we have a lot of other addictions that become more socially acceptable, and people don't realise that they can still get support for them. So we've spoken about this before quickly, but shopping.
Yeah.
Financial, money, because you can actually join DA, Debtors Anonymous. You've got food. So food, that there's Food Anonymous or Eating Anonymous. There's actually an Emotions Anonymous. You will only be able to access that online, and it's mostly in America, but that's not to say that there isn't a few happening in the UK, but it's really quite interesting. Gambling Anonymous. Then you've got obviously your AA that everybody knows about for alcohol. Then you've got NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous, but that covers everything. That covers alcohol, drugs, smoking, everything. You've even got CA, which is Cocaine Anonymous. You've got KA, Ketamine Anonymous. You've got a whole influx. So if there's anything that I'm saying to anyone and they're like, oh, well, have you got this? It's a ask us or ask somebody else. But what we're going to do for a minute is forget the addiction and go underneath it, because often, yes, there is part of it that if you're brought up in that environment, it's something, it's learned behavior and it's in the family, it's familial, but it's also having a look at what is it that you're actually using that addiction for. And I have said the word using, and for some people they might not like that, but it's important to acknowledge it, that everything we do in life is good for us when it's balanced.
Yeah.
So for instance, food, and this comes about the fact that you're doing your 8-week workshop at the moment, and I was supporting one of your weeks, and we're talking about digestion, and it's really important, and a few different things came up in the conversation from that workshop. And obviously food is important when we talk about nutrition, we talk about diet. I like to come away from that and say about nourishment, because our bodies need a certain amount of food.
Different types of food, macros and micros. Yeah.
And then also to enable the actual digestive system to work. So if we're completely stressed, we're unable, as our gut shuts down, so we're unable to digest properly, even when you consider when you're eating on the run. So if you're sitting eating but you're still working, or you're grabbing something and eating in the car, your body's not actually ready to receive that food.
Completely. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment.
And yet other people sometimes, and put my hands up. You know, in January, I will tell you I don't like chocolate hobnobs. But in January, a month of January, when it's grey, rainy, it's a bit of an ick month for me, if I'm really honest. That's sometimes where I find myself eating chocolate hobnobs. And if I do now, for me, that's like, oh, what's going on for you? Because for me, that's a marker that I'm emotionally eating. But it's really amazing how we can use different things to try and either mask how we're feeling, or we're using it sometimes to make us feel happy because we're unhappy and we've become out of balance.
Yeah.
So is that clear, or have I made that a little bit confusing saying that, Chris?
No, no, you've made it clear. I've just got a few questions to ask you though, or to recap. So it's about suppressing how we're feeling, and often we are feeling sad, upset, angry, or we're not feeling at all.
Yeah,
So we eat, drink, take drugs to suppress and or make us feel better. That's what often the addiction is, but there's always that underlying cause. Now, when you mentioned the anons, whatever anon it is, usually the anons are not just for the not victims, the individuals with the addiction. It's for their friends and family. Is that correct?
yes. So what you've got is you've got closed meetings where those meetings are only for people that are going there to get support for their addiction. But then you also have open meetings where supporters can go as well. They're welcome to go to and see what's about. And that's really important sometimes for some people, because when there's addiction in any family, just because somebody's going to meetings, just because they're trying to stop that addiction, doesn't mean to say as soon as they stop that everything's fine, because it's not. It's a whole family thing, because that relationship with, so let's choose alcohol for a minute. That relationship with alcohol, if you stop the alcohol, what's going on with the person themselves, but what's going on with the relationships outside as well. But you can also go to, for instance, an alcohol, Al-Anon, for
Right.
instance, if we're talking about alcohol. Now, Al-Anon is for friends and family of anyone that you're like, if you've got anyone near that you're concerned about their drinking and it's impacting you. So it may be a work colleague, it may be someone personal to you, it may be a child of yours, it may be one of your parents. You can go to Al Anon. There's Teen Anon. Teenagers can go. Teenagers whose parents are alcoholics or their grandparents are alcoholics. So there's a whole spectrum of support there for people. And I don't think people are aware of what goes on.
I'm not aware, to be honest. I think unless you're in that addiction, either because you've got the addiction or you're around people with the addiction, you don't know about all of this help.
Absolutely. And because it's anonymous, they're not actually allowed to go onto social media and share about it. It's by
Oh,
word of mouth.
right.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
So that's
That
why
will
you,
explain it.
yes. But I do feel personally, I do feel it could be done in a way that still keeps people's anonymity. But when you see some of the work that goes on, it's absolutely amazing. And there was a documentary that was on Channel 4 at one time, and I'll try and find the link for it, that was explaining it. So it started more in America. And yes, it did start in a church base.
Hmm.
So when you go to, and we're talking about Alcohol Anonymous at the moment, when you go, they do talk about God and the Serenity Prayer, but that's a form of communication. So it may not, it's faithless. So it's not about any particular faith, but they use the word God. But if you're not religious and you don't like the word God, then it could be universe or higher self. It that's just a word to communicate. I've been to several meetings as a supporter, and I can say to you that the amount of love you find in any room is amazing. And everybody has different roles. So you have a committee, and it's all done voluntarily. you have a committee, and as soon as you arrive, when you go to you look up where a meeting is, and if you want to go along, you just go along. You don't have to book, you just turn up. And there are people that are there to greet newcomers straight away. So, and no one is judged, no one at all. So it is scary, even as a supporter, when you're going the first time. It's like, oh, what's going to happen? But I can't tell you, it's so welcoming. You don't have to talk, you don't have to share. Sometimes they sit in a circle, sometimes they sit in rows, but generally when you see it on the television, everyone just sits in a circle. That's not the same for everybody. And as I said, you don't have to speak. But if you're struggling and you still want to go along and you haven't stopped, but you'd like help, go along. You can still go.
When I've heard about this before, and I heard about the religious side of it, because someone just said that to me when I was working in the psychiatric hospital, where people were in there being treated for their addiction and not the underlying cause. We've
Yeah.
spoken about that before. That religious bit really put me off, because I'm just not religious myself. But then the way that you've just explained it there, that you can believe in whatever it is, you give like almost the pain over to somebody else. You still take responsibility, but you
Yeah.
give the pain over to something else. I can get in with that. That really, I can tap into that myself, and I'm hoping that our listeners can also, if they're religious, they can tap into it. If they're not religious, they can tap into it, because of the way that you've just explained it.
Yeah, thank you. But the hardest part is as well. Now, we all do this with good intentions. So if we know someone's drinking or taking drugs or whatever they're doing with food addiction, because food addiction comes in two different ways, either overeating or not
Yeah.
eating enough. We know it as bulimia or anorexia or being overweight, but there is an addiction as well. So you can get support from that, because it's easy for people to say, oh, just lose weight or start to eat. Actually, no, it's looking at the underneath. Now, you do the 12 steps. So the 12 steps, it's not something that you go into and you go, oh, I'm doing the 12 steps, tick, 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 and it'll all be magic. It's like anything, the work goes into it. But I would say to anyone who wants to go along and see what it's like for yourself. But also, don't just go to one meeting. Go to different ones, because it's like anywhere you go. Like for yoga, it took me a year to find my new yoga teacher,
Yeah.
because I went to loads of different yoga classes. Not that the teachers were the bad, that I just didn't resonate with them.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
That's the same with any meeting that you're going to. And sometimes it's okay to go to a couple.
And it's the
So
same with counsellors, isn't it, Bev? Like, just because you don't get
absolutely,
on with one counsellor doesn't mean to say you can't go and find another one.
absolutely. This, as I've said right at the beginning, it's about relationships,
Yeah.
relationships with yourself, but with others. And you're also talking about trusting.
Yeah.
This is huge. Trusting someone with some of your emotions that, let's be frank, for however long you've been suppressing in different ways.
Yeah. 100%.
So, you know, one of the things I will say is, as much as we want to tell someone to go to a meeting, we can't. We can
Yeah.
offer to go with them, and I've done that before with people. We can find out where we've got to go, but that doesn't mean to say they go, or they want to go, or they're ready. They may
Yeah.
not be ready,
Yeah.
because this is scary. But it's important that if you're not in the addiction, that you're also getting the support as well.
100%. Yeah.
So you're both getting support in whatever the relationship is.
So we've touched upon this before, and it's like, some people say that you should stay with someone with an addiction because they need support, they can't do without you. But there does come a time in all different kinds of relationships that enough is enough, and it's then impacting your health and well-being, and you have to walk away. And it's often seen as selfish that you're walking away, and then that person's literally hitting rock bottom, and unfortunately some of them may end their lives because they're very unhappy with what's going on for them. You're then left with that potential guilt for not staying with. So how do we unravel all of that? Because that's very complicated, isn't it?
It is. It's very complicated. And like in any decision like that, there's no one right or wrong.
Yeah.
What's mostly important is working out what is right for you and your own safety. Because even if you stay with somebody who's at their lowest, who's, in deep addiction, they themselves can be dangerous. You come home to find someone in such a state that you're having to deal with that. And, all depends what your relationship is with that person, but are you their carer? And how have you become responsible for this person that doesn't want your help, but also wants you to be there? So I can't sit there and say, oh, that's it, you should just get rid of them, or you should stay with them.
Yeah.
Each person needs to get the support. Now, there are different ways. Absolutely, because when we had Matthew on here, he spoke about sobriety in a different way, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
And that works for some people. So it's really about finding what is right for you. I can't say that enough, but also let's take away the fear. That's why having this conversation is great, because one of the other things that people, even when I speak to clients sometimes, because obviously I can't work with someone who's deep in addiction and not looking to get clean or sober, I say to them, what's the worst thing about going to a meeting? Because they have to go to meetings for their support. And they say, yeah, but what if someone recognises me?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, what do you think they're there for?
Yeah. Yeah.
And no, in America, it's very different to here in the UK. In America, if you go for a job, they'll ask you about your, do you have any addiction, or do you have any issues with alcohol or drugs? And if you tell them, yes, I have had, but this is what I do, you will still be employed. But they deal with it so differently. Whereas over here, if you say that I'm an addict, sometimes the judgment, people really are fearful of that. And it's so wrong, because what is it you're scared of?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. I'm not saying it's not. I've been in that scenario of addiction around me, parents. I can't say too much because obviously people listening and keeping anonymity, but I've been involved in it in all different factors and different types of relationships. And all I can say is, if you're listening to this podcast and you yourself are in addiction and you want to change something, just go online and find out where your first meeting is and go to it. Go, take a friend if you can. And if it's somebody that is listening thinking, my loved one or my friend or something really needs to go, yes, give them the information, but don't expect them to just go, oh yeah, I'll go, and that'll be it sorted, because that doesn't happen all the time.
I just wanted to bring the other side of this in as well, because it's the reality of some victim and survivors' environment. So in my family, my stepdad was the alcoholic. My mum was in a domestic violence relationship with him. We all were very scared of him.
Yeah.
He had regular pub times, regular coming home times, and that always ended in verbal abuse, physical abuse, and other stuff. And a lot of his behaviours were very triggering to us even today. We live with some of that trigger. And it doesn't matter how much work we might have done around all of that, it's still a trigger. So I urge anybody that is in an addiction, that once they realise that they are causing problems within their family environment, that they go and seek the help, especially if they want that environment to be healthy for the children and young people that they're bringing up. But also, I want to give the people that are living with people with addiction almost the permission to leave that situation if it is not for them. You do not owe anybody anything. If you want to stay and help and it works out for you, fantastic. But if you're finding that that situation is very toxic and you really don't know how to get out and you want to get out because you want to live your own life, then seek that support as well and go and do that, because you are an adult and you deserve a healthy, happy life. So I just want to put all of that out there, Bev, just
Absolutely.
to balance it all out.
Chris, absolutely. And you know what? We like talking about these difficult things because it's only through having these conversations that enables people to think, oh, that's me, what in whatever format. And I can also say, you know, I don't know what it's like to say I'm an addict.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I can't even pretend to say I know. I've been to different support groups and, you know, my name's Beverley. I need support with this. I know how, and I know how hard that was to ask. And I've spoken about this before, you know, having the courage to be vulnerable is so hard when you're so scared and when you're fighting to keep safe. But the miracles that happen, and I will say miracles, I know many an addict that have changed their life around, not only their own life, their family's life, and they continue to go to the meetings. It's not just about, oh, I'm going to go to a couple meetings, get better, and then that's it. It's like, no, it becomes part of their life, not a way of life. It becomes part of their life so that they continually have support. So the meetings become a way to enable them to relive their life. And that's
100%.
really beautiful. So,
and it's important.
It is. So NA, I'm very lucky to know one of the founders in the UK. So it started in the early 80s in Soho. It was already happening in California, and they opened up a meeting, and it's peer-to-peer, like we're very aware as survivors anyway. And when they first opened up, they had a couple of weeks and they didn't even make their rent money. They were literally paying, and they shut the doors after about a month. And then they thought, no, we've got to do this. We've got to do this. And now look how it's got so big. If you don't want to go to a meeting at first, but you're interested to find out more, go online and have a look. They even do online meetings. Just put in what it is that you feel that you need help with. You can even go in sex addiction as well. So everything, but everything is covered. Debtors Anonymous, you name it. And I can't say enough how what's wonderful is, whilst you can't speak about the like the different associations on social media too much. And what I really love is sort of like on Instagram is following people that are proud to say I'm clean. Davina McCall, you know, she's a big advocate, and no, she doesn't want to live her life being labelled as anything, but she's a big advocate and is very honest about how she turned her life around.
Yeah. There's nothing more powerful than being with other people that have gone through similar to you, and they understand the struggles, they understand the pain, they understand how hard it is to be on that pathway of recovery, that journey of recovery. It's very empowering. So going back to obviously my 8-week course where you started this, it is having the like-minded people in the room that just get it. So you don't even have to go there. You're just with like-minded people who have been harmed, as in my group. These people have been harmed, and we've all got different coping mechanisms. Some have had addictions, still have addictions, some don't. But their self-esteem, their self-worth has been battered, it's shredded, non-existent. And as you said right at the beginning of this, relationships and coping mechanisms, it's about rebuilding that relationship with self, knowing that you're worthy, knowing that you are going to be okay, and knowing that you have the ability to respond, i.e., you have the responsibility to empower yourself through hopefully choosing less harmful ways of coping so that you can rebuild your health and well-being without harming yourself further, because the coping mechanisms that you are currently using are destroying you rather than healing you.
Absolutely. So well said, Chris. And you know what? There's one thing I will say. For anyone who's thinking of going to a meeting, go along. As I said, you don't have to say anything. You can call yourself whatever you want. Don't even have to say your name. But the power when you sit down and you're in a room full of other people who know exactly what it's like. You know what? We often feel shame and guilt. But to sit in a room knowing there's other people that know what that feeling is of shame and guilt means you don't have to go there. They already know. You know,
Yeah,
they'll offer you
exactly.
hugs. You don't have to take the hugs, but they'll offer you hugs. And what they'll probably ask you is, do you want tea or coffee?
Yeah.
Not asking
Yeah.
for your story. You know, you're welcome. Here you are. You're in a place with other people. And even if you don't go back for a while, that's okay. Nobody says, well, you didn't come last week. It's not about that. So if
Yeah.
anyone's got any questions, please, that's why we like doing the Q&A, because there's different questions that have come up or scenarios that we've been involved with. And I think this was a really, really important one to speak about.
Yeah, very positive as well, because there are many people at the moment wanting help but don't even know how to go about it. They don't even have, as I said, the self-esteem or worth to go, actually, I'm hurting here.
Yeah.
And they don't trust, so they don't actually reach out to anybody.
Yeah.
But we are saying there is loads of support out there. You've just got to be brave enough to take that step to reach out, I think.
And sometimes it's not even being brave. Sometimes it's reaching a stage. Some people reach a stage, they get to a point and they just think, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I'm
I
sick of
want to
being
change it.
tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired is the
Yeah.
phrase.
Yeah. I just want to change it. I just don't know how to change it. And I
Yeah,
haven't got the energy. Well, you know what? Find a group,
yeah,
go to
yeah.
one. And someone very close to me would say, for anyone wanting to make a change, 90 meetings in 90 days sounds really hard, but actually, if that's what you want to do to make some changes, involve yourself with it. So you can do
Yeah.
some in person and some online. They are all different times, all different places. So yeah, that's coming quite nicely with about 30 minutes. Any other
It
questions, Chris?
has.
Before
No, not really. I just maybe wanted to just share with everybody, if you don't mind, Bev,
go
just the
on.
book that they can um buy if they want to, and all funds go back into the charity to help run the 8-week course. And this just is just available on the website www.survivorsofabuse.org.uk.
And just to clarify, you host an 8-week course that is funded because it's funded by the charity. And if anybody's interested in more information about that, that's for anybody that's been a victim of abuse.
Yeah,
And as we spoke about, some people also have addictions as well, some don't. So you're not going there necessarily for the addiction, but it will be information that is beneficial in addition to going to any meetings.
100%. Yeah. So they can find out more information just on the website as well, Bev. All right.
Yeah.
So I think that's wrapped that up really lovely, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it's goodbye from me,
And goodbye from me.
and we'll see you next month for Q&A.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.